So let's talk about what's happened now then. You've resigned.
I
In your
have.
resignation letter, you said that the university has basically become a place that takes in grievances and victimization and puts out a certain ideology on the world rather than a place for
Yep.
critical, free thinking. What
Yep.
was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Oh, I'll tell you exactly what the moment is. So the camel was, I'm trying to extend that a little bit. So the camel was weighed down by an astonishing amount of straw. I think that the one moment that made me realize that I couldn't do it anymore was I had really tried to make a meeting with the president of the university, and he refused to meet with me. And I said, look, 5 minutes. And his staff kept saying, oh, he's too busy. He can't do it. He's too busy. So I managed to get like just a very brief meeting with the dean in my college. And I said to the dean, I said, Portland State University made the list from Greg Lukianoff. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind with Jonathan Haidt, that he has an organization called FIRE, F-I-R-E, Foundation of Individual Rights and Education. And Portland State University made the list of the worst colleges for freedom of speech. And he said to me I shouldn't have said he, edit out the he. And this person said to me with total sincerity, it's a good thing to be on those lists. And that utterly blew my mind. Like, because up to that point, I had believed, to at least to a certain extent, let me repeat that. So that utterly blew my mind, because up until that point, I naturally assumed that this was a horrible bug of the system, but not a feature. And he's telling me, and this individual is telling me that this is a feature of an actual feature of the system. And it just blew my mind. And then I said, I cannot be complicitous anymore. I'm compromising my integrity. I mean, I knew at that point, but I always justified it to myself to think, well, if I left, who would the students have, right? Who would be pushing back on this? But at that point, I just realized, well, it was that was really the point. But then it was just the constant investigations. I mean, the last investigation was so fucking insane that it was just like, that's it. Like, okay, you're really trying to throw me out in disgrace. I got it. Like, I got it. I was on this call. They were upset that on my Twitter feed, I used the word investigation. And they were claiming that to use the word investigation, you need to go to the IRB to get some kind of permission from human subjects. And I said, well, I'm doing this as a private citizen. I'm not doing this. And an individual who was on the call, I will not name the individual, said, yeah, but at the time on my Twitter feed, I had a link to my book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. Now I have my website. He said, yeah, but this individual said, yeah, but if you click on your book and then you scroll down to the author page, it says Portland State University in your bio. And I just realized, like, at that point, what, like, you are digging, like you
right.
are.
So they basically made life digging. Untenable. They made life impossible for you, essentially.
Well, yeah. And for what? For what? Why? I mean, I've been criticized a lot. Oh, you should have stayed there, or you should have left earlier, or you should, like, look, man, I did the best that I could, and I'm constantly being harassed all over the place. But I also want to make something extremely clear. I am not a victim in this. I fought back against a bunch of things. I fought back against an illiberal censorious ideology. I fought back against the people who hired me to do a job that they themselves prevented me from doing. I fought back against the institution, and ultimately I lost. Like, there was only so much I can do. I brought in diverse speakers to challenge the orthodoxy. I could go on, but there was simply no point to just stay there indefinitely. I mean, why would I want to subject myself to that? It's a form of insanity.
So, Peter, what do you think is going to happen in the longer term and in the broader picture here? I mean, universities have historically tried to play a role of being a place where you can argue for anything, you can say anything. It's a hotbed of different ideas, of crazy ideas, where the misfits can come and flesh things out and try to figure out what's true. If, as you say, they're now becoming places that are committed to the opposite of that ideal, to, at least in your experience, a place that
many
quite
others
openly values an antipathy towards free speech in favor of racial equity or justice or whatever they conceive it to be,
right.
then what becomes of universities?
Well, I don't have an answer to that question. I mean, I can speculate. Either the ideology will burn itself out, and in which case you will see an absolutely historically unprecedented gaslighting, where you'll have people say, "I never believed that. I never believed that. I just had nothing to do with it." So the ideology will burn itself out, which I think it will. I'm sure it will. I don't know the damage it will do to the institutions, but it is inherently unsustainable, because for an ideology to sustain itself, it either needs some kind of a state power or state control in which they mandate have some kind of a speech code or speech restrictions, and ultimately that has to be by force. So they could try to do that. There are technological fixes around that. But in order to keep an ideology in place, its proponents need an apologia. They need a defense of the faith. Like they need to know the opposite sides of the argument. They need a 1 Peter 3:15. They don't have that. So the ideology is inherently unsustainable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think what you'll see happening is exactly what's happening now, is that parallel architectures will emerge in which there are, just as in the 90s, the media empires were crumbling. Now, today, the internet is revolutionizing and changing things. And particularly with the pandemic, it's expedited that. So we don't really need to work or teach from home anymore. So I think that one of the things that you'll see happening is the emergence of new institutions. And I welcome those institutions to give people a choice from the corruption that we have now. I also think that the legitimacy, I wish you had asked me this a few years ago, I would have given the same answer now, but it seems less prescient now that I know the outcome. The legitimacy crisis will deepen. The crisis of confidence in our institutions, like people, conservatives, for example, fundamentalists, evangelical conservatives will come up to me and when I'll talk about global climate change, and they'll say, well, why should I believe that? 99% of all this is true from the National Association of Scholars, donations to political parties from Portland State University, and I urge you to fact check this, was to the Democratic Party. So we know most professors are liberal. So why? This is just a bunch of liberal people. That's the other reason we need a diversity, ideological diversity in our institutions. And so when people point to these bodies of literature and scholarships, look, this guy's a Muslim, this is a Mormon, this guy's gay, this guy's straight, this guy's, but they also have these views that it's not just a bunch of liberals telling you that the Earth's warming is anthropogenic. So anyway, so I think you're going to see a deeper, crisis of legitimacy in our institutions. I think we'll survive it, but I'm more pessimistic now than I've ever been, without question.
When you say, Peter, that the ideology will burn itself out, because one reason why it might not would be if it had state-sanctioned power enforcing speech codes and so on. My worry is that you don't need the state there, and that there can be a self-enforcement mechanism where ideas, I mean, we've seen throughout history in so many different places where there's a kind of an elevation of a certain groupthink or a mythology, and to transgress becomes an almost quasi-blasphemous experience, and you just get shunned. Corporations just don't want to have to deal with people who are squeaky wheels, and so they fire people for racism if the person was just articulating a difference of opinion about quotas or something, and it becomes a self-perpetuating cultural phenomenon. So
this is going to take a long time. Hold on, let me just hold on one second, because I have another interview. This is going to take a long time. Let's see if I can do this very, very.
You can
quickly.
make this the last. You can make your response here the last.
No, I'll give you one more after this. We'll end on something hopeful. So the problem is that I can't just walk in and teach in a K through 12 system. I don't know about on your continent if you can do that, but On this continent, you need to go through teacher certification programs. All of those teacher certification programs now have been compromised by woke ideology. They're all predicated on one book, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You teach for liberation. You teach to overcome oppression. So even if you had a wand and you could wave the wand and you take out all wokeism out of the K through 12 system, it would repopulate with people who have been indoctrinated from the existing K through 12 teachers.
And for Australians, K through 12 is just the primary and secondary school system. We're kindergarten to year 12.
Okay. All right. So we have a problem with the ideology is not going away anytime soon, as long as the colleges of education are controlled. And I would urge you to read Lyle Asher. He's a ASHER. He's a professor at Lewis and Clark. He does some wonderful work on colleges of education. So we have a complex set of problems in which there is a moral value, a moral imperative that people don't know the other side of the issue, or they're not taught the other side of the issue. And to even get published, to enable you to get tenure, you have to publish morally fashionable things. You simply cannot publish something that goes against the dominant moral orthodoxy. Now, also on your continent, Peter Singer has the Journal of Controversial Ideas. Maybe that will emerge as something. But right now, this is the situation we're looking at. That was an example of a parallel architecture that I was talking about. So it would be outside of the traditional norm or the mainstream, and as those norms have broken down, new norms will emerge. The decentralization, you see that happening. So I don't hold up much hope for the university system in its current incarnation. I think that there's been an erosion of confidence and public trust in those institutions, and that will continue. And the people in power are either in the orbit of the ideology, or they're true believers and they have jobs for life, and they hire people who also, now they want diversity statements. So the problem is actually getting worse. I don't know, when our engines of knowledge production are compromised, if you think America's bad, wait until you see the new hegemon.
All right, let's end on an optimistic note. What's the best thing about free speech?
Enables you to figure out what's true. And even enables you to figure out why you need free speech. It's in any society, absent, let me phrase it to you positively. Yeah, the best thing about free speech is that it enables you to figure out what's true. And it's free. You just have to be honest with yourself and find a person with whom you can have conversations in which it's okay. You can let friends be wrong. You don't have to agree on everything. It's completely okay if you and your friends have a disagreement. In fact, it's actually good, because then you can test and challenge each other's beliefs in good faith from a position of friendship.